Jamie. Thank you for coming again. I appreciate your patience with all this. I realize this is a little bit narrow and unideal, but here we are. So here's how we're going to do this. Scott, who will introduce himself in a second, will be giving a brief statement. Julia, the attorney, who will also give a statement. And then after that, we will be taking some questions. I ask a couple things. One, just please bear in mind that these guys have been traveling quite a bit in the last couple of days. It's a very draining situation that they're dealing with. So if we cut off the questions or if we feel like they've had enough, I apologize in advance. And second, because it's a pending legal case, if there are questions they can't answer, again, I apologize, but Julia will do her best to answer any legal questions. With that, Scott, if you want to introduce yourself, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, I'm Scott Hopgood. I want to thank everyone for coming out today. On April 13th, my family's life was changed forever. Since that day, we've been living a nightmare that has gradually become our reality as we meet daily with lawyers, navigate threats to our safety, and as of yesterday, begin making mandated trips back to Anguilla, as we promised authorities we would. We want the same thing as the people of Anguilla, for the truth to come out. To that end, I will fully comply with the requirements of the court to ensure that all the facts are presented. A great deal of misinformation and outright falsehoods have surrounded this story, and I'm hopeful that when the real story is presented to the public, the people of Anguilla will understand how this tragic event unfolded. Lastly, I want to thank my family and my legal team for supporting me and for staying so strong throughout this process. We have a long road ahead of us, but I'm looking forward to someday getting back to the life we once had. Thank you.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here. My name is Julia Arbisman. I'm the international counsel who is representing Mr. Hopgood. Yesterday, Scott and I made what will be the first of 3 court-mandated trips to Anguilla this week. All in, it took us 23 hours from the time we took off and landed to JFK by a combination of 6 commercial aircraft. These trips have been preceded by numerous submissions to Anguillan authorities to ensure Scott's safety on the island in the face of a credible threat of violence. We were advised, in the context of a security warning by the police authorities, that the less time in Anguilla that he spends, the better. In the days leading up to yesterday's appearance, we were also formally advised by the Attorney General, who we understand is leading this case under exceptional constitutional authority, that he would be seeking an adjournment of the hearing currently scheduled for this Thursday, August 22nd. He is not ready to bring his case. Despite this, and knowing that the adjournment hearing is a minor procedural step which requires no input of the defendant whatsoever, we attempted to negotiate Scott's appearance by video, which the Attorney General is fully empowered to make through his consent. The Attorney General declined without explanation. In light of the threats of violence against Scott, we were in court in Anguilla over the weekend, arguing before the judge who granted bail in April that there was no need for Scott to come to Anguilla, given that the adjournment of the hearing of the 22nd of August. Why, in those circumstances, is it fair to seek further attendance by the defendant with the threat to safety and the financial and physical toll of this requirement until a settled future date is fixed? There's no logic or justice in this. We were denied. The legal team has worked tirelessly to make certain Scott receives a legitimate and fair trial. While we will fully comply with the requirements of the court, which we exhibited yesterday by making the first of our appearances, we are strongly opposed to onerous demands to attend procedural hearings in person when video would suffice. It is cruel and unreasonable justice to drag someone into the jurisdiction, to put them in harm's way simply because there's a power to do so. On the one hand, you say there are credible security threats, and on the other hand require him to appear in person, not 1, but 3 times in 1 week. Why? when he doesn't need to stand charged but simply sit through the prosecution's request for an adjournment? Why? And this is just the beginning, I'm afraid, Mr. Hapgood, of a long legal process. Late last week, we also learned that the Attorney General withheld for more than 2 months a toxicology report that showed Mr. Kenny Mitchell was not only drunk, with a blood alcohol level that is double the legal limit in the US, but also high on cocaine and other drugs when he attacked Scott. We have been informed that Mr. Mitchell was also facing rape charges in the weeks leading up to the attack. We have been informed by the police that he had breached the condition of that bail and had been in their custody. The charges would likely lead to loss of his employment and loss of his visa rights to reside in Anguilla. During those months that the report has been withheld, the AG has allowed a portrait of Mr. Mitchell to persist in the media that is at odds with what we now know to be true. I worry about Scott's ability to get a fair trial when relevant information is withheld and a persistent narrative has been given to the potential jurors, the people of Anguilla, which is based on factual falsehoods and omissions. We're here today to urge the authorities in Anguilla and in the UK to work with us to ensure that the rule of law is followed, and followed in a way that preserves Scott's rights to due process. If you cannot guarantee his safety, we urge you not to require his physical attendance at every procedural hearing, especially if the only matter of that hearing is an adjournment that you yourself are bringing. This is not only good law, it is also common sense. We are confident that the evidence we've already uncovered and which will be borne out through the legal process, that Scott will be found innocent of any wrongdoing. We're looking forward with the assistance of the Anguillan, US, and UK authorities to resolving this matter finally. Thank you for coming.
We'll take questions now. If you could, just identify yourself before you ask a question. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Rana with WNBC. Could you go into a little bit more detail of what sorts of threats you are receiving and why you believe they are credible?
I'll answer that. The threats have been channeled directly through the legal team. We have not been informed as to the calculus that goes into the police assessment of a threat situation for logical reasons. We know that the threat was sufficient to have triggered what the police refer to as an Osmond warning, which is an obligation under the UK law to provide disclosure and information that there is an existing threat to life. And we have acted on the information that the police have given us, not once, but multiple times since the 1st of August when that was first communicated to us.
The police there are saying that he is the threat.
Correct.
No one has contacted him directly or...
Other than material that exists in social media, which is rampant, and I'm sure we've all seen. Thank you.
Ron Allen from NBC. In talking to some people in Anguilla, there's an allegation that after the initial altercation that you at some point held Mr. Mitchell down and prevented him from speaking, even after other hotel employees had come into the room. Is that true? Why did you do that?
So obviously you'll understand we can't comment on anything that has been given through witness statements, and that is the subject of live proceedings. As you can imagine, that is exactly the substance that would be borne out by that is currently scheduled to be adjourned for the 22nd of August.
Question for Scott. Errol Barnett with CBS News. You told us that there's information you want to reveal to the public, and you think that when the public knows that, their opinions of this case will change, not just of the incident, but of you. Can you set the record straight? What is that?
I think Julia alluded to some of those facts in her statement, and I think, you know, as we go to, if and when we go to trial, that's the time for that information to come out. I mean, I don't think I can really
characterize what this new information is, or what you think would
Well,
change?
sir, I've referred to a couple of the things. We think the toxicology report and the very circumstance of it not having been disclosed, which is obviously of material importance to the case, is some of the facts that Mr. Hapgood is referring to.
You've also
Thank you.
spoken about the difficulty going back and forth for connecting flights, having to be there 3 times this week. Why not just stay there for a week? Would that be financially easier? Would that be a possibility?
Beyond,
Because in the security environment in which we're in, we're advised not to.
And
Simple
Scott,
put.
how are you?
I think we need to
How
move
is it for you?
Let's move on to
Thank
the next
you.
question for a second. Okay, go ahead.
Adam Reese, MDC. First, if I can ask you, just to clarify, they've asked you to come down 3 times, and have they told you that they're adjourning the 22nd, and you've come down once out of 3? If you could just clarify that. And for you, this is the first time we've heard from you. Can you explain exactly what happened when this gentleman came into your room, and also how you and your family are handling all this?
So as to the question to me, I can confirm that there are 3 freestanding obligations which require us to touch in jurisdiction throughout the course of this week, all having to culminate in the hearing on the 22nd, which is currently going to be adjourned. So they're freestanding. We have not satisfied all of them by virtue of our first trip yesterday. And as to the second matter, I'm afraid we can't talk about, obviously, the matters that relate to what had transpired, which is the subject of the proceeding.
Can you give us any information? You called the press conference. I'm just curious why, you obviously wanted to say something to us about what happened, other than that the suspect, there's a toxicology report and so on and so forth. I mean, the victim, I'm sorry, there's a toxicology report about him, and that your travel is onerous to there. You've been charged with manslaughter. You're not guilty, I would presume you're saying?
I had not.
What's the question? I'm sorry.
Can you give us some indication of what happened? Because again, you called us here to try and explain what's going on. It's a very serious allegation. We're trying to understand. A lot of people in the public don't understand why a hotel employee in a uniform on a ship would come in and try to rob you. It doesn't make sense to us.
So sorry, I apologize if the focus of the press conference isn't clear, but it is really to explain that the environment in which we're made to participate is extremely difficult. And it's made difficult not by the fact that there is a case to which a legal process attaches and in which we're obviously participating, demonstrated by the fact that to all the doubters in Anguilla and elsewhere that we would not. Thank you.
Is there anything he can just say from a personal perspective, how you are doing, how your family is doing? Can we just hear in your own words?
We're hanging on by a thread, to be honest with you. It was a terrifying incident. It was a terrifying experience on the island post the arrest, having spent multiple nights incarcerated, being threatened on the island, and since. My wife, my children, we wake up with it, we live in it, we swim in it, we breathe it every day. And it only came to a head yesterday, having to board a plane to go back to that island to satisfy my bail conditions, which, look, we're trying to be as respectful of the process as possible. So that's why we went back there yesterday, and walking through that airport again and walking back into the police station to do what was essentially, touching a table and turning around and leaving. We were Julia was there as well. We did what was asked of us to be respectful of the process, and we're trying to do everything we can. But if you're asking about how it's been emotionally since then, it's been a living nightmare.
Julie, Joe Torres on WABC TV. You said, Julia, that the toxicology report has been withheld. Police have told you that it's unsafe for baby to be here, but at the same time mandated that you be here. And that it defies not only logic, but common sense. At the same time, you say you'll be confident that he'll be found innocent of any wrongdoing. With all that preceded that comment and all the things that don't make any sense, what gives you the confidence that in the end you'll be found innocent?
Zealous advocacy, or the trust that eventually, when everybody understands that due process expectations arise here from the very menial procedural hearings all the way to trial, we look forward to working with everybody to ensure that there is a proper hearing that takes place in a neutral forum, in a way that actually takes into account the merits of the case, and that's all that anybody can request to see.
You nervous that won't happen based on what you've seen so far and the lack of common sense that's been applied?
Naturally, but we're all here to do justice, right?
Tamar from New York Post. So will you be at Thursday's hearing in person? And what kind of jail time are you facing? And how long is the trial expected to last?
Sorry, are we expected to be at the hearing? Yes, we are.
In person.
And what is the other question?
How long is the trial expected to last?
The trial on Thursday. Well, since
For the entire
we don't know, Thursday will obviously be a very limited duration.
But Thursday might be adjourned.
It will be adjourned.
It will be, so.
All the information that we've been given is it will be adjourned. However, a hearing is required for that adjournment to be implemented.
You still need to
You
go
get to
on
go and
Thursday.
be there and then it ends.
So you need to be there in person.
Correct.
For the gavel to be
In
slammed
order,
down to say
in
that.
order for us to stay respectful of the bail conditions that have been set, which require 3 touch points throughout this week. Yes.
So you're mandated to be there.
Correct. Otherwise, we're in breach of bail.
If I could ask, you're very critical of the legal system there and what they're requiring of you, but you must be also aware that there are people who feel like Mr. Hopgood should not have been released and because the charge is so serious and that he's being treated favorably because he's an American and there's a lot of concern about the tourist industry. What do you say to that? That you're being treated very fairly, that you're getting a break because you're an American, a wealthy American, there's a lot of concern about the tourism industry there, that most people who are charged with a crime like this would never have been allowed to leave the country.
I'm not sure what the preferential treatment is referring to. As you're aware, there was a proper decision, judicial decision taken in the circumstances of the bail. That's a public decision of the Anguillan courts. I'm not going to refer to it, but it specifically cites to the prevalent concern for security of Mr. Hopgood had he not received bail. So I'm not sure where any of that concern arises if anybody were actually to read the judgment of the learned judge. That's all we can say.
Other than raise public awareness, Julia, what do you think this news conference, what do you hope this news conference will do for you and your client?
I think awareness is key. We are raising awareness through every appropriate forum, including at senatorial and congressional levels, because I think this is a huge injustice of an individual who simply by virtue of being an American effectively is having to be dragged into a very chaotic and unsafe situation.
Why
and
is
that
the
is
awareness
unfair.
key? Are you hoping that
I'll make sure to get as many questions as possible.
Stephen Bateman, Inside Issue. Can you elaborate at all on the threats you say you've received on social media, and are you taking any extra security precautions if and when the next trip to the island happens?
We have traveled with security detail, and we understand that security was provided by the police to the extent they considered necessary and whatever was appropriate within their protocol. We don't have any specifics of what that was.
And what about the Facebook threats or social media threats? What kind of things are people saying to you?
Well, it's all in the public domain, so I'm afraid this would be rehashing the record, as it were.
You have a question?
Electric Billigan from CNN. I was just wondering if you could talk more about what you expect from the hearing later this week, if you expect a court date to be set or what.
We don't have any information of when the adjourned hearing would be. We hope it will be soon.
Hazel Sanchez, CBS 2 News. I know your attorney has said that she's optimistic that it'll be clear, but what is your gut telling you right now? What are your true feelings going on?
This is my first experience with any kind of legal matters, so I'm nervous because I just don't have any experience. But I know that I was a victim, or my family was a victim here, and I think the truth will come out, and I look forward to that.
Are you talking? Can you share any kind of conversations you've had with your kids since you've been back?
If you want.
Well, I can tell you that I'm blown away by their strength. It was a terrifying incident for my daughters, and that since my son, he was not in the room, but all three of them have endured a ton, and I couldn't be prouder of how strong they've been throughout this process. And my girls have each had a birthday since then, and we're trying to live our lives, but they've been amazing.
Have they had any kind of therapy?
You don't have to answer.
You don't have to. Can you tell us how old they are, your children, the children that were in the room?
14 and 12 now, and I have a 9-year-old son.
Day to day, are
about what's in your mind.
Should I talk about work? Day to day, like I said earlier, that's all I do is kind of deal with this, whether it's conversation with lawyers or police or media or counselors. I mean, that's my day to day. It's
Have you
all
been
day,
put
every
on
day.
leave? Have you been put on leave from UBS?
I am on administrative leave, yes.
Without pay?
You don't have to answer.
Okay, I think that's pretty much it for now. Thank you guys for coming out. I believe you all have my info. If not, I've got cards for any additional questions. Okay?
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.